Consider Cannabis is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment recommendations. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition.
People that are using cannabis recreationally, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some underlying trauma there, and that's why it's having such a good effect on them.
It's time to consider cannabis. I'm your host, Curtis. This is the 26th episode, and this week we're going to sit down with Lea Moore, who has found relief from her PTSD with cannabis. Now, last time we spoke to Tiffany Carwile of Ohio Mama, and after the release of that episode, I was asked to share how cannabis has impacted my life at the State House in Columbus during an event put on by the Sensible Movement Coalition and Normal Appalachia. While I was happy to be asked to share, the real highlight for me was getting to meet Tiffany and her son Jackson. Now, if you haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, I would ask you to give it a listen soon and really consider taking a moment to go to considercannabisnow.com, click on episodes, and then click on episode 25. There you will find the email addresses of the decision makers and an email template that you can send them. Write your own if you want, but please send them a respectful email voicing your support for autism to be added as a qualifying condition before the next meeting on July 12th of 2019. If this is your first time listening to the show, I want to thank you for taking the time to consider cannabis with us today. I started this podcast because I wanted to know what real people experience in life before and after becoming a medical cannabis patient. On this journey, it became clear to me that these stories were powerful because they are honest portraits of the lives of everyday Americans. Because we all live with the truth that life as we know it can and eventually will change in the blink of an eye. If you're a medical cannabis patient, please consider contacting us at considercannabisnow@gmail.com. Come on the show, share your story. Our life stories, our truth will break the stigma. And if you're not yet a medical cannabis patient, thanks for listening. If you have any questions or don't know where to start, send me an email too. I'd be happy to help you along the way. I don't know everything, but I've learned a lot on this journey and I'm happy to share. Now let's sit down with Lea Moore and we'll consider cannabis together. Apparently my iPad decided to install an update and reboot. So I'm going to go sans notes and we're just going to have a conversation. Does that sound good?
Yeah, cool.
You prefer Lea, right?
Yes.
And you are a medical marijuana patient in Southwest Ohio.
Yes, I am, for sure.
So when was your first experience with cannabis?
So we were kind of talking about it on my way here, and I've had kind of like a roller coaster with cannabis. I grew up with it. Like, my family they're very big into cannabis use. And so, like, I've always been around it, but I kind of saw, like, the financial strain and things like that it took on my family, like, to get it, and what life was like without it, like, was a little interesting, too. Times when, like, my mom would have to be drug tested and stuff. So I kind of had written it off as, like, I don't want to do it. But I knew very much from a young age, like, the medicinal aspects of it. Like, I knew that it was beneficial, but I just didn't really feel like it was ever anything I would, like, ingest or partake in until I was, like, 14, which is super young. Oh, I feel like I'm yelling.
Oh, no, you're good.
So I remember I actually had pinched some from my mom's stash. And this is kind of funny because I haven't really had a second to think about my journey, and so it's super cool. By the way, I just want to say that you're doing this because it's caused me to think about it, and it's kind of funny just to see how everything is connected, and how every time I'm like, this isn't for me, God's like, yes it is. So when I was 14, I pinched from my mom's stash and decided I was going to smoke before school. Like, I had seen and heard how it was working for some of my friends to, like, just get them focused, and I had a lot going on. I had just met my dad at 14 for the first time.
Wow.
And it was a really disappointing experience. I had pink hair at the time, and he was like, no. Like, he did not like that.
Oh, wow.
He was, like, court ordered to have a relationship, but it wasn't there. It didn't happen. And so I was like, screw it, I'm going to do this thing and see what happens. So that was my first time I smoked before school out of a can. Out of a tin can.
Coke, 7-Up, do you remember?
Oh, I think it was Sprite.
Sprite?
Yeah, and we had, so I went to school.
Remembers, yeah.
I went to school in Over the Rhine in the School for Creative and Performing Arts. So we were downtown and we, like, smoked out of this can, and I just remember, like, we had been early, so we walked around downtown, and it was the first time that I was present. Like, I, up until that point, had been in survival mode. I have a history of like abuse and domestic violence and some other things that we can go into maybe later. But I felt like I was very much always surviving. And then in that moment, I was able to like really take in my surroundings. And I remember noticing like signs and stuff downtown. And I had gone to school downtown for like 2 years at that point. So I should have noticed these things and I hadn't. I don't know. It was just a whole different experience until I went to school. And I remember like being in class, and basically what happened is I was in class and I was super focused. I was listening to one of your podcasts and someone had a similar experience with school where they were like, I was just focused for the first time. I felt that. So I'm sitting there and I'm like having a great time. And then all of a sudden I remember hearing like doors slamming in the hallway. And I had smoked with 2 other people. And long story short, one of the other people that I had smoked with had a really adverse reaction, which I've never seen or heard of. Like, I've never actually really dove into it just because, I mean, we were 14 at the time.
Sure.
So it was a long time ago. I'm 26 now. And
how adverse was it? Just like a panic attack? And
she like, I don't know, she started slamming doors and she was just screaming like, I smoked pot, and like was just like...
Sounds like a panic attack.
Yeah, I guess.
A pretty aggressive one.
Which is so interesting. Like, it's just very interesting to me. And I think a testament to just how different our bodies are.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I was fine. The other person was fine. She just had a really bad time with it. And, I mean, I feel so bad. Like, she swore it was laced. And we were like, I got it from my mom who was doing this every single day. And, like, she's fine. Like, we were fine. I don't know. It was just a very interesting, like, in hindsight, it was just like, wow. Like, also, that sucks.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I ended up getting called down to the office because she, you know, obviously was
Yeah, she
like,
told
hey,
this is what
everything.
happened.
Yeah, it was fine. And like, I wasn't bitter because I was chill too. Like for the first time, I don't know. I was really thinking about this earlier, and I was like, in hindsight, it was such an pivotal experience, but I've never really thought of it that way. So I got called to the office. They searched my locker. I almost didn't get caught. I had it like in a baggie in my hat and my coat, and the security guard took out my hat and like searched my pocket and went to put the hat back and felt the bag move.
And so close.
I know. Like in that moment, it was just like, knock, knock, knock. Here you go, consequences. I ended up having to go to alternative school. So in that moment, I swore off cannabis again, obviously. Like I was like, nope. I was a good kid. I've always been a pretty law-abiding citizen. Sometimes I stretch rules, like I go above the speed limit kind of stuff, but
most people do.
Yeah, like I'm not like out there doing anything super crazy. So I ended up switching schools, wrote it off, and I didn't really get back into it until like the last 2 years. So that's kind of where my journey started. Yeah.
So at 14, you tried it in this high school setting and let it go until a couple of years ago.
Yep.
What brought it back into your life?
So I had my oldest son when I was 17. So with that, I was a single mom for the first 4 years of his life. I got married when he was 5, 6-ish. And he was diagnosed at 4 with ADHD. And so there was so much that like came along with that. He was right away put on pharmaceuticals, and like I'm a behavior therapist now, so hindsight being 2020, I definitely see how his environment kind of enabled his behavior and how it was just kind of this ripple effect that happened. And so we went to the doctor, and instead of them saying, you know, what has happened to your kid, they said, what are the symptoms? They looked at the symptoms, diagnosed him, boom. And it was kind of game over from there in terms of pharmaceuticals. I was young and didn't know either, like the effects that they have.
Yeah, your doctor's giving them to you.
Right. And I was young, so all I knew was what they were saying because I'm single mom.
I mean, your parents have told you your whole life to trust what your doctors are saying.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. Very much so. And the doctors we were going to, I was very confident that they knew what they were doing. My son saw the ADHD like specialist doctor on the West Side, so I thought, and he had diagnosed ADHD himself, so I was like, okay, this obviously just is what it is. And I feel like I should point out that I was told that if he didn't get medicated, that he was going to get kicked out of preschool. So over the course of a few years, a couple of things happened. I started noticing his personality declining and him being just a totally different kid. And I had also been diagnosed with ADHD, also been taking Adderall, also started noticing some things within myself, like digestive problems. They were trying to like take out my gallbladder. So many things like was going on in this time in terms of like the medical world. Like we were getting all different kinds of pills and different doctors. It was just the turning point, though, was when they tried to diagnose him with Tourette's because he had developed tics over time. So he was 4. I took him to a neurologist at Children's around 6 for the tics. And when I did that, they were like, oh, he's got Tourette's. You know, here's the DVD on how to introduce this to his classmates so that they don't make fun of him. Bye, see you later. And I had been like, well, let's look at the amphetamines and maybe the effect those might be having on him having tics. And they were like, no, it's just Tourette's. Right, bye. Right.
Wow.
And so that's when I first started. And I think like right around that time was
and that was from Children's? In Cincinnati Children's?
Yes, sir.
That's really disappointing to hear that.
Yeah, I have a lot of beef with Children's, which is sad. I know they do good work, but I just haven't had a pleasant experience. My perspective is, I think, different. And so when they said that, we were actually in the middle of this like big transition. So I had my second son, and then 13 months later was pregnant with my third son. And in that same month, we were told we had 30 days to move, even though we were supposed to be going month to month. And my grandpa was dying, and I was just like spiraling. Like it was just getting really bad. And on top of it, my son was having a lot of behavioral issues, even though he was taking this medication that in my mind had fixed everything or whatever. And CBD was just starting to be a big thing. And so I was like, maybe we'll try it. So we moved. And then also when we moved, I was like, I need something. You know, I was having a really hard time keeping our family together with the grief that I was feeling with my grandpa passing away. And then also, so my son's father, my oldest son's father, who had left when he was a baby, came back into the picture and had taken me to court for reallocation of parental rights. So I got all of this in 1 month and was just like exploding.
Wow.
And that's right when I met Katie, too. So we ended up moving to Springfield, and my son's behavior just spiraled. I mean, he was like throwing chairs, which is not my kid at all. Like when he was 2, he would sit and tell me that he was frustrated. So we're big like talkers and feelings people. So for him to be like aggressive was just bizarre, especially on the medication. So I was like, we're going to take him off. We're going to try CBD and supplements. We lived in Springfield, which is very near Yellow Springs, and it's all like holistic and all those things. So I was just trying to learn and soak up as much as I could. So I had all this stuff going on, and I reached out to my doctors like, I need something. And that's when I started learning more about pot, and I joined like this Pot Moms Facebook group.
So you mind if I try to...
Please do.
Okay, yeah. Yes. So about 2 years ago, you started journeying back into what cannabis can do. You discovered CBD. Mm-hmm. You've got these other things going on. You've decided you want to add THC into that mix as well.
For me. For him, obviously, we just did CBD. And I guess I forgot to mention that. Within, it was days, his tics went away. Mm-hmm. And so that's when I was like, okay, obviously this is working. And then I started learning more about the entourage effect and stuff. And so I was like, okay, for me and what I'm feeling, because at that point I was diagnosed with postpartum depression. So then I started looking into how THC and all that stuff helps with depression and stuff. And so then I started smoking just cannabis, like THC. But he was taking CBD only. And then from there, that's when I really started looking to get my medical card. And long story short, I got a PTSD diagnosis is how I got the medical card. So.
Can I ask what your trauma was?
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about trauma. First of all, is what I want to do. And then I'll talk about my trauma. Trauma, I didn't even know anything about until I was in like an ABA training, so Applied Behavior Analysis training. And a lady from the Kelly O'Leary Center was talking about trauma. The trauma tree was the first thing that I learned about trauma. And basically and I meant to bring it for you. It's part of why I want to bring my laptop, but I forgot to show you. But so trauma starts, it goes back as far as stress during pregnancy. It's also interventions at birth. So C-sections, being induced. My youngest son was born with a cord wrapped around his neck. That's an intervention, things like that. All 3 of my kids have had interventions at birth. Then it goes further into the ACE score. Oh, man. Oh, okay. Whew. Okay, so ACE is adverse childhood experiences. That's where my trauma is my childhood. There are 10 things on the ACE scoring sheet, and I experienced 9 of them. The only one I didn't really experience was a natural disaster. Domestic violence, sexual abuse, all of those things, been there, done that. So in the trauma tree, it has, your roots, right, are these things. And then you grow as an adult, it manifests itself in things like chronic pain, depression, anxiety, goes on and on and on.
My wife and I were just actually doing a book. It's called How We Love. They talk about childhood experiences influencing the way you interact with your spouse. So, I absolutely believe that there are roots that just produce this fruit in our life that is, comes out with fits of rage. But it is back to anxiety. It does come back to fear. That does go back to those hurts.
So also, with that is epigenetics. Have you heard of that? There's a study that they did. You can look it up. I wish that I was better. I have 3 kids. So remembering, names of research articles and stuff is really hard for me. But it's out there. You can find it. Basically what they did is with dad mice. I believe it's strawberries or something that mice really like. And so they would expose the dad mice to the male mice to the smell of strawberries or something, and then they would shock them. So by nature, they love this thing, but they would they would shock them. And then what they saw is the offspring of those daddy mice, they wouldn't go towards the smell of strawberries or whatever that they naturally would. So because of dad's trauma, kiddo was triggered by that thing, so didn't go towards it.
That's really weird.
Right. Crazy. I feel like you can go woo deep with that if you talk about just our ancestor and our history and all of the trauma rooted in that. And then there's all of this other trauma. There's the interventions at birth, which I don't know what anybody else's experience is, but for me and my kids, they pushed those interventions. They pushed induction. They pushed just different things that I think on the flip side, they should then talk to you about trauma and the effect it has on your brain and how it causes you to be a little bit more sensitive to your environment and to the responses around you. With that, my trauma is rooted in, I was 6 weeks premature. My mom was 19 when she had me. And right there, boom, I am overly sensitive, right? And then from there, I didn't really have the encouragement and support that I would need since I had a sensitive brain. And so my brain just over time has been through it. I've seen things that no kid should see, and I've been through things and kind of had to endure a lot, which I think we all do at this point. I think it's good to think that everybody has been through a level of developmental trauma at this point. Helps with empathy.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons we're all walking around so angry.
For sure. Because I think it keeps going. As we get older, the trauma it's intense. I always knew that I was different. I just didn't get things like math or social skills. I've always been quirky and weird and lived in my own little world really for a long time. And then if I didn't live in once I stopped living in my own little world, I think I kind of disassociated a lot. Which is a PTSD term. So the way trauma works and affects your brain is that over time, your body then has a natural reaction to triggers. If something triggers me, I don't notice, per se. It's not I have this big flashback and I'm oh, I'm having this feeling because of this thing. No, I could just be sitting here and smell something and then all of a sudden my body's fight or flight. We talk about trauma and chronic stress because your body is in fight or flight. And so when you're stressed and your body's in fight or flight, what gets depleted? Do you know? Endocannabinoid system. So if you're in constant fight or flight, it gets depleted. So what I see a lot in the children that I work with is they are so tense. They are so stressed, so just have something built up. And I'm like, is it because their bodies are in fight or flight? Like, is that something? Because then there's so much deeper too with like the nervous system and the vagus nerves. I don't know if you've heard anything of the vagus nerve, but the vagus nerve runs like from behind your ear all the way through like your digestive system. It helps regulate your mood.
Okay.
And if it's stressed or whatever, it manifests itself like digestion issues, mood problem, like depression, anxiety. And C-section babies are pulled up out of mom's belly by their vagus nerve. So that's a grown doctor person amount of force that's put on a little baby vagus nerve. I don't know exactly the research. This is kind of a chiropractor thing. When you dive into it, to me at least, it all makes sense how it's connected in a bigger way than kind of, symptom based. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like instead of just looking at something going on and being like, oh, that's just what's going on, if you break it down by like the different systems of the body, I feel like you can figure out where to target healing. I don't know. I'm not, like I said, I'm not a doctor, and there might be more complex things to it.
Before you got your own recommendation for PTSD, were you on any pharmaceuticals or any treatment through doctors?
Oh, yeah. So I have taken, I've not taken the harder, like I've never taken Xanax or like Lexapro, any of those like ones that I feel like probably would help my problems. But I've taken the benzaprines or whatever. I've taken all of it. I actually did the DNA testing to see which medication my brain genes and stuff that you're supposed to take. And it gave me Pristique, which was really interesting because I had a couple of friends who also did the DNA testing, and they came back with Pristique too. And it was also the newest drug on the market. So.
Interesting.
I don't know. I took it and I was a raging biatch. So I could never get past side effects of medication. I just couldn't. Like, I am a pretty self-aware person. I analyze behavior for a living, so I'm pretty aware of my own behavior and am able to kind of figure things out. And if I'm taking medication and it's like making me crazy, I'm not having it build up in my system just so I can take more. That idea, I mean, I get that like it works for other people, but for me it just didn't. But I think it's because PTSD, right? So those medicines are trying to fix something that can't be fixed with a chemical because it's literally, my brain isn't developed in those areas. The chemicals are only going to create side effects and make things worse. And it's a Band-Aid for sure versus, if my body is depleted in endocannabinoids and I replenish it with cannabis and then start to make healthier decisions in my lifestyle, that's more where the true healing would be.
Yeah. As you're talking, it just frustrates me so much. I was just watching a Facebook video where that one senator lady was trying to pass a bill to get research done. I'm just like, I understand the desire for double-blind studies. I understand the desire for more research. I think we should research the hell out of this plant. We should always keep doing more and more research.
Right.
But when do you say, all right, okay, you get to start using this? I mean, I'm sorry. I get frustrated because I am really riled up still from last week's interview with Tiffany and going to the State House, and I'm so frustrated.
Yeah, and I think rightfully so. As a parent, you should be. And I think that more parents should be, especially like me. I didn't know any of this stuff. Like my kid he took Concerta, he took Adderall, he took Ritalin, he took all of it. To me, that's just mind-boggling. He's got a little tiny little baby brain. From the time he was 4 years old, he's on these amphetamines. And really what it boils down to is his nervous system's going crazy. His endocannabinoid system's depleted. He begs me to give him CBD oil. Begs. I can't. Like, I just can't now, which really sucks. So, yeah, I think parents should be, I'm sorry for lack of better terms, pissed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The amount of fear I have of giving my kid CBD is ridiculous in my mind, just completely ridiculous. I'm a medical marijuana patient. I have THC in my system. If I give him CBD that has even a trace amount of THC in the system, if they ever find it, I'm done. Like, they will call me an unfit parent, and it's ridiculous. Yeah,
it's frustrating, especially I think as patients, we know that it works. And so when I was in court, for this custody battle. The lawyer, if you can think of the nastiest, most mean lawyer that you've seen on a TV show, that's how this man was. And I'm not like, people just aren't mean to me. Like they don't talk to me the way he was talking to me, and it was really offsetting for me. Because I believe in grace, I believe in vulnerability. I don't believe in guilt and shame, and that's all it was. I just don't think that it's a effective tactic. Mm-hmm. So what he compared being high to is if I took care of my kids wasted drunk. And those are the words that stuck in that judge's head. I'm for sure. And that's why I loved your podcast about getting high and how vulnerable you were about that, because it's so, and I don't know how to explain that to people because I'm sure it's different for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I could only explain my experience. It's going to be different for you.
Right, exactly. But, I know that I'm a functioning person and I'm a good person, and I know that like when I smoke, it's not like I am in the Dare commercials or whatever that from back in the day where you're like slumped in the chair. That's just not my experience. And so to have it compared to like I was taking care of my kids drunk, like I don't know, I just really didn't like that.
Yeah.
And it was just a very ignorant and frustrating experience too. I feel like if I am stoned, and I mean, you may have a different experience, but if I'm stoned to a point where I shouldn't be behind the wheel of a car or something, I just think like how many times have I probably driven, while under the influence of alcohol and I shouldn't have. But if I'm at a point where I've smoked too much and I shouldn't be driving, I'm pretty well aware of that. Yeah. Like I know I shouldn't be driving. I know I shouldn't do anything. Like I'm good. Like I'm...
No, I'm good.
Yeah, like I'm good. Like I'm good. And then if the effects for me wear off enough that when I am good, I know I'm good. I don't like.
To me, it also depends upon what method of ingestion I've done as well. Because if I've eaten a little bit, I never get uber euphoric. Mm-hmm. The pain, I feel a little bit of numbing in the pain, and that's about it. And that's way different to me than vaping a bag from the volcano and being like, all right, kids, let's play some board games. Like, I mean, it's just like I have a different mind. Like my mind is in a different place on both of those sorts of highs, if you will. Right. And that's why I have an issue with the idea of driving high, because it's very subjective to each person's biology. If you tested me after driving, you're going to find THC in my system. Was I high while I was driving? Like that's a different question, because I use this daily because I am a chronic pain patient.
Okay, so I was just going to say that Lea and I were talking about last night that I think when people describe feeling high or euphoric, it is so individually based, because like me, for example, I was in the midst of such like life-controlling anxiety and depression for such a long time that if I used just the tiniest amount of cannabis, it got me to where most normal people just feel normal. So it may have felt euphoric to me, but it was because it was for the first time in such a long time that I was able to actually not feel like I was dying inside.
I think that's a really good piece that people don't think about a lot of, especially people who are seeking cannabis as medicine, as distinguishing what high is versus what freedom from your symptom
freedom
is.
That's it.
And I think people are
that's
scared
exactly
of that.
what it is.
Also, I think they're afraid of being free from their symptoms too. I think they become a crutch is something that I will say that I've seen very much so, that it becomes something that I think that almost our bodies maybe even start to reject healing. In the documentary on Netflix, there's one and they do sound therapy. I think it's called Heal. And they do sound therapy with this woman who's just having some really harsh like eczema and some other things. Basically, her body gets to homeostasis. The second it does it, her body rejects it. She goes right back up, ramps right back up. It goes into fight or flight. So it's almost like over time, our body just gets used to being stressed out. Sorry, excuse me.
That's right. We're labeled as a profane podcast. So
oh, cool. Okay,
swear
yeah.
away.
So we're all stressed the fuck out. Sorry. I still feel bad. I don't know. I work with kids. So yeah, I definitely think that there's a piece there too where we reject it. I mean, I think of like for me when I take my vitamin supplements, because I'm not good at doing it, I almost feel sick the first day that I do it, because my body's like, what are you doing? You've been drinking alcohol for like 3 weeks straight. Now you're trying to be healthy. Like almost is what happens. It's like, I don't know, it gets used to. I don't know what the like science is behind that.
I went to a chiropractor at Arasti, and I really liked Arasti because they don't twist my bones and manipulate me. You know, they do like massage and then physical therapy exercises, which makes my back and neck feel great. But my lower back was really hurting, and then he pressed in on this hip flexor and just killed. I was like gonna cry. It hurt so bad. And what he was explaining to me was that I sit driving my kids around, and then I sit here editing podcasts, and I've naturally shrunk my hip flexor. This is its natural resting position now, and I need to be able to stretch it out and make it go back to the way it's supposed to. Otherwise, it will return to an unhealthy state.
Same with our brains.
It's interesting. I don't know.
It's my thought. Maybe.
Yeah, science is neat, but I don't know.
So cool.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
and
our
one thing
bodies.
about the fight or flight thing is that, like, I've recently been diagnosed with a processing disorder and a brain injury. And it has explained so many things that have happened to me over time. But basically, with all that anxiety and depression and the inability to process things properly, in the past, what's been done is doctors have said, well, here, take this medication. And it helps for a while, but eventually it just builds up too much and it comes out in adverse ways. And it wasn't until I started doing brain mapping and neurofeedback to like retrain my brain to go that direction, the right direction, that I've seen changes. It never was the medications. It's been a combination of like several things, including cannabis, whether it's in THC, CBD, or however I need it at that point in my life, and then literally retraining my brain to get back to how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Instead of just band-aiding it with...
Because neuroplasticity is the thing that they don't tell you when they're throwing pharmaceuticals at you, right?
Yeah.
They don't talk about
And
that.
it's not an easy process, you know? It's like, I compare it to like if you're doing push-ups to build your muscles in your arms. It's the same thing, and it's hard and it's exhausting and it takes work. It's the same thing with your brain. If taking a pill fixed it, that'd be fantastic, but it takes work.
Yeah.
You know, you have
People
to...
don't want to, we're all lazy. We want to do the work.
We are lazy to do the work until we are faced with some really harsh realities. Like, for me, I lost 40 pounds after I had my surgery because my harsh reality was if I don't get my weight under control, my neck is going to go faster and faster and faster.
Wow.
So, I mean, there's definitely a point I think people can reach, but I don't know, maybe some people don't ever reach that point.
Yeah, I think some people I think are prone to rejecting it, and then because we do have the capacity to do it, but
Yeah. It does
hard.
take a lot of work. It is a lot of work.
Well,
Absolutely.
and when you're at such a point of desperation, like everything kind of feels overwhelming. It just seems hard to take that first step.
they don't make it easy either, you know? Because, I mean, I think in that process of healing, you do have to take like personal days. You have to take time off, and you can't in this culture. I think, you know, at least for me as a mom, the pressure that I feel, especially going through this custody stuff, it's debilitating, tears you apart. And so, you know, at the end of the day, when I've given everything to all of these children, I don't have the willpower, the energy to make myself a meal or to have, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, I don't get my needs met. And that's just like the reality of it. And I think that that's really crucial in healing. Like, you have to get your needs met. You have to slow down and be present and connect with what's going on right now instead of either what's in the past or, I don't know, rewiring your brain. Like, you have to do it.
Mm-hmm. So you face a lawyer who's a mean SOB who really talked to you just in just a really crappy way. Like, what happened with that?
This whole thing has been a blessing in disguise just because I am kind of able, I think, and fired up to talk about my story and to talk about what I've been through so that people can just know, and it can raise awareness that this is like not okay and that we need to be talking about trauma and what the effects are and how it looks, because I think if we break it down, then more people will realize that they've been through some trauma. You know, we shove things under the rug and don't realize how it manifests. But so in this courtroom, the lawyer, he reamed me for, I would say 30, 45 minutes Are you stoned right now? When's the last time you smoked? He was talking to me like I have a very normal routine. Like I wake up every day at 4 a.m. and smoke and things like that. And I was like, I mean, I do to an extent. I don't know. It's just not as structured or like whatever that he was making it sound. And it was just really hard for me to defend myself because a lot of the stuff he was saying, I was like, it's not even true. Like, you're not even like,
habits, rituals, schedules, those are very good for our well-being.
Right.
Just, I mean, maybe not everybody, but for a lot of people, those things are good things to have.
But he was, I think they're great too. And I am like more mindful. But there are days when I don't need it as much. If I don't need it as much and I'm aware of that, then I might not smoke as much or something, He was just like, every day. And I'm like, when it's bad, this is what I do. When it's not bad, I can go, days. If I've built it up in my system, I really don't need to smoke every day. So I don't know. It was just, he was just reaming me. Like, he didn't even get my son's date of birth correct. So from the beginning, I was just like, this sucks. Because I didn't go into it expecting it to be so aggressive. And I'm not an aggressive person. So he asked me, all of the stuff about pot. And then he had asked why I have like the recommendation, why I have my medical card. And that's when I said, because I have PTSD. And he said, well, what's your trauma? When you ask me that question, it's fine. I can deal with it. When I've been attacked for 45 minutes in a room full of strangers, a man who walked out of his son's life when he was a day old, I just froze.
Well, I want your trauma because I want to know more about you, and I want your story for the podcast. Like I want you to be able to tell the world. But when people accuse you of what's your trauma, what's your pain? Oh, your neck really hurt. Yeah, that's
what really got me is my son's dad wouldn't look me in the eye. I was not prepared for that question. I did not think that they could even ask that. Just because of what we know about trauma and the effects it has on our brain and what it does when we talk about it in a triggering situation, I have a hard time talking to a therapist about the things that I went through, let alone giving a detailed account in court in front of strangers. It was just bad. And from there, I just was derailed. Like, I could not.
Did you appeal to the judge at all?
I looked at her and I said, do I have to answer this question? And she said yes, because the question of like my mental stability or something like that is relevant, something along those lines. That's not quoted, but
sure.
And I just like, I couldn't, like, I could have, in hindsight, like, this is why I couldn't be a lawyer, because in hindsight I'm like, I could have talked about, what I talked about earlier, the ACE score and all of those things, but I just didn't. I was just like, like, I don't know. Like, I don't know where to start. And especially with my son's dad being there and him being part of the story, what he had put me through. And I was homeless. Like, we were homeless because he was $1,000 behind in child support when he left to join the Navy. So, there were things that I was just like, how is this happening to me? It's kind of what my mentality was. And I don't know, from there, I just could not. I went on autopilot is what I want to say. It's not like I got emotional or anything. I just shut down. And I did not talk about the things that I have researched and could talk about till I'm blue in the face in a setting like this. I just couldn't do it. So from there on, like, it just kind of was just like autopilot. It was just lame. And we were supposed to so at the end of it, they asked for my son's dad's proposal. And his proposal was that he becomes residential parent and lives with my son. My son lives with him during the school year. And I would see my son every other weekend and possibly one day a week, which is less time than I had proposed that he had. I proposed that he had every weekend, all summer long, and any other school breaks. I just wanted him during school. Behavior therapist, his behavior has been, something that I've tracked for a long time, something I'm passionate about. So that's just, I was really excited and hoping that they would keep it that way. And he's involved in extracurriculars with me. But I didn't talk about that because I couldn't, because I was shut down. So I just yes or no answered questions. That was it. And we were supposed to get the ruling in July. However, I got it last weekend, and the judge granted custody to my son's dad. So, it's just, I don't know, it's a really hard thing. And they also didn't submit findings of fact, which I felt was interesting. So,
as to what made them make that decision?
Uh-huh.
What tipped the scale or whatever?
Yeah, because I'm sure you probably know, but your medical marijuana use cannot be used in the reallocation of parental rights. it's written into the medical marijuana law.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
You file a motion to see that, or?
I can. It's a lot. I'm already, yeah.
No, it's money. It's money. Yeah, absolutely.
It's really hurt us. You know, my son's dad makes triple my salary on a good day, right? Because I'm paid hourly. So he makes triple what I make, not including $5,000 bonuses. I can't combat that, you know? I'm already struggling with trying to get my medicine every month.
Well, yeah, and honestly, if you like filed that, paid the money, confronted the judge, they'd probably just use that. Look, he makes more money. Mm-hmm. That's all they'd have to say, really.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, and it's just so hard because it doesn't look at, for instance, so he's been gone. Dad has been gone the last 8 years and just in the last year moved back. So this is our first summer doing alternating weeks, which means that this is the first time my son has been gone from me for longer than a couple days. And he's gone for a week at a time. This last time that he went was the first time that he's gone. And when he came back, he had eczema. Like his eczema was flared up extremely bad. And the worst I've ever seen it. You know, cortisol gets released. It causes flare-ups. Whatever. I can kind of break it down. And I was trying to explain to Dad, I'm like, you know, look at what is happening. Like he's having a biological reaction from being gone from me for so long. Imagine what it's going to be like in the school year when, I mean, his stuff is going to get totally thrown off. And it's just they don't think about things like that in the courts, and they should. You know, we should talk about what is going to happen when you've got a kid who's been with mom. I nursed him till he was 2 years old. We have a bond that's insane because I was a single mom. And
so
now
how old is your kid now?
He's 8. He'll be 9 in September.
How does he feel about this? What has he said to you about it?
He cried when I told him. And I've always been open and vulnerable with him, but in the way that I want his dad to be involved. I've never kept dad from him. None of that. Like I've always encouraged their relationship. And so he knows that. And he has seen that and heard that and everything. And he's actually been really hurt by the things he's heard his dad say. And basically he cried and he was upset, but he's an optimist, thank goodness. And he said, you know, let's just try it out. And he knows that the second that it goes sideways or something happens that I will fight. So I have 14 days to object. I did counter proposal and ask that we don't do, because it's every other weekend and 1 day a week, which is dumb. Like they live in Franklin, Ohio. I live in Norwood. That's just, it's too much to do. So I asked for 3 weekends a month and just forego that 1 day a week. So we'll see. And I mean, I may fight it. I don't know. It's all very much in limbo, but it's
also not permanent, right? Like, I mean, there's going to be an opportunity to change that agreement, don't you?
If something happens.
Just if something happens.
Yep.
So you just have to track all the times your kid comes back with eczema?
I have to track.
Up.
Thank you. I have to track all the times he comes back from eczema. I have to track, you know, if he's late. I have to write these things down. I have to keep track of text messages because this is what he did to me.
So what's the threshold? Like, when is enough before you get to make...
But that's what I'm saying.
And when is it too much that it starts to traumatize the child and you have to start thinking in terms of that?
I am under constant scrutiny. I can't make a wrong decision as a parent or else it's going to be thrown in my face. I don't know. It's very hard. Like, I feel like as humans, as parents, we make mistakes. Like, things happen. You know, I spanked my kid in the very beginning because I didn't know what the hell else to do. I was 16, 17 when I had him. You know, 16 when I got pregnant, 17 when I had him. I didn't know what I was doing. There's not, like, I don't know. I didn't have any help or support, and Dad was gone. Like, I just did what I thought I had to do, and I've learned and grown. And I think that that's also the piece that I want to talk about is resiliency. So, you know, you have trauma, you have the ACE score, you have all of this bad stuff that happens, but on the flip side is resiliency. And I have a very high resiliency score as well. And basically, you know, all resiliency is having one consistent person in your life. And honestly, for me, that actually has been God, I would think. For my son, it's been me, you know, and which is why he's been able to get through the adverse stuff that we've gone through and the homelessness and things that we've overcome. And now it's like all of that was thrown in my face and all of that was like seemed like a bad thing or whatever. And I've overcome so much. I don't know. It was just super, super hard to know, like, okay, now where do I go, or now what do I do? Because if I mess up, who knows? Like, who knows what's going to happen? It's been very, I would almost say humbling, because I'm like so aware of every little decision that I make as a parent or as a person now and things. So I believe in grace. Like I said, like I believe in being forgiven. So
how has that been with cannabis and your faith? How's that been
amazing?
In your life? Yeah.
I think like without it, I was really starting to get bitter with God just because of all of the things that did start spiraling out of control. And it's funny that I was getting bitter at God. But in that time in my life, I wasn't going to church. I wasn't praying. I wasn't doing any of the things that I should have been doing to be in a relationship with him. So he was probably like,
I don't think that's what God was doing.
I have a weird relationship with God. I'm just going to let you know. I'm very open with him. Like when I get mad, I will cuss. Like me
too.
Yeah.
Me too. I absolutely have that in me as well.
Yeah.
Biggest struggle I've had with it is just getting people that I've known from church to not see me like a stoner or something.
Right.
Now,
well,
which is weird. But
have
I feel
you had
like
the experience that if people know that you do smoke cannabis or ingest it, whatever, they think you're high all the time?
Yeah.
Have you had that experience?
Yeah, they're like always kind of like looking at your eye,
yeah,
and checking
like anything,
you out.
like right, yeah.
Is he high right now? Like
yeah, or like if I do something quirky, which like I almost feel like I've lost some of my personality because I'm afraid to act like myself because then people question me or ask if I'm high or whatever. I'm like, no, just let me do me.
I'm me. Like honestly, I'm me. Like sometimes if I get, it's so funny that's a thing too, because I could be high and be like really excited and talking a whole lot and really fast and about all sorts of stupid things and things that don't matter.
Right.
Or I could be high and ready to pass out and fall asleep. Like, I don't know. Like, what do you mean? Like,
right. Yeah. It's like don't pay so much attention to it. Like, it's seriously not that serious. I don't know.
And it's really frustrating to me because, I mean, it is medicine. It is a government recognized medical program right there. That should be enough for the courts and the judges. And I think part of the problem is there's so many people who want to promote the pot leaf and the tie-dye and the big blunts and the wraps and all these like, like let's get stoned, let's get high. And I don't have a problem with that so much like in general for what it is, but the fact that it's so dominant that that's what people are literally just thinking. We just want to be high and legally be able to get away with it.
Well,
and that's really frustrating.
Yeah. Well, and I wish that's why we talked about trauma more. Like, I wish that I could do like a presidential little blurb how he gets to have the second. Like, I want to have a second and talk to people about trauma, because those people that are using cannabis recreationally, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some underlying trauma there, and that's why it's having such a good effect on them. If more people were aware of what trauma looks like, and even things like the effect of technology and the blue light on our brain. And with CBD oil, we saw the tics go away with my son. I'm going way back. So with my son, in the CBD, we saw the tics go away. However, they come back. And when they come back, it's when he's had too much exposure in front of a screen. Research is showing that technology and screen time has the same effect as heroin on our children. So the tics that were induced by Adderall, Ritalin, all that stuff, come back when he's in front of a screen for too long or he's had uncontrolled screen time. It's when he's watching the YouTube videos or something like that for hours. Like he will, like 2 or 3 hours. And so we've really rung it in. There's a great program called Mightier, and they use your blood pressure to really regulate the video games. So in the tablet, there's all of these games that are super fun. There's ones that are like Minecraft, all of it. However, if your kiddo's playing that game and they're too chill, like they're just like me, like it's super easy, it sends these inhibitors into the game to make it harder, which ramps up their blood pressure, and it's tracking it. And when they get ramped up, it throws you coping skills. It throws you take some deep breaths, do some cross-body, whatever. I don't know whatever.
What's this called?
So it's called Mightier, like mighty. And it's all about retraining your brain and getting you to practice those skills so that when you're in a fight or flight situation, you can recognize because you've been playing this game and you start to feel this way and then you have to breathe. So then it generalizes, which I'm all about generalization, into real life situations, basically. Or you can say, you know, okay, you're getting a little ramped up. Let's take some deep breaths. And they know because they've already done it in a natural, like, whatever situation.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I mean, all of those things, growth mindset, those are all just great things for teaching our kids a different way of thinking than I think what we're raised to think. We're raised to think, at least for me, like, I see people who think their kids are burdens, and it's so much, especially I feel like if you get a diagnosis and you have to go through therapy and, oh my gosh, insurance, like, I feel my heart, like, for you guys so much every day. I see these parents who are just drained because of what they're having to go through with their kids. Get your kid. You're supposed to enjoy and love. Like, you should get that opportunity. I don't know. It's interesting to me, like, like, for me, like, what it feels like is my son's dad wanted my life to look like his. And so it's not going to.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit about money. I'm sorry. I just don't. If I could not have it, I'd be great. Like, I like living underneath my means because it gives me the ability to be present with my kids. Because I did the working my ass off thing. I mean, I pulled 60-hour weeks when I first started working. And I was getting no time with my son. And that's around the time that his behavioral issues started. He needed me and I wasn't there. And so it's been a passion of mine, like, you know, to just really explore DDBP through children's.
Oh, yeah.
My middle son, he came in like a wrecking ball, and I had really bad postpartum depression. And I think with that, I just was very disconnected from him. We just had a really hard time. And he ended up having some motor and speech delays. And so I took him to Children's Hospital to be evaluated. This would now be my second time going to Children's, the first time the neurologist, the second time through DDBP, to have him evaluated just to see kind of what was going on with him. He does some like feet things too that are interesting. And so I just noticed some stuff and I was like, let's check it out. And they told me they see a problem. They see a deficit, something along those lines, but they wanted to wait 4 months and track his regression. I was like, at that point, I want to say he was like 1-ish to it.
4 months is vital.
One, right, huh?
4 months is vital.
Thank you. So that's what their professional opinion was. And I said, fuck you, and quit my job. And I did the only thing that I knew, which was ABA therapy, to the best of my ability that I could do with a 1-year-old. You know, I just was intentional with him. You know, I hit all those skills. I had him doing flips. I was practicing words. We were reading. Like, we were doing so much. And I just saw him blossom, and there was no regression with him. He's done nothing but progress since that.
Because you worked with him and put
early intervention, yo. But what killed me is that they saw it. And they wanted me to wait. They wanted it to get worse instead of catch it right early and let's work on it. It just was very frustrating to me. And there's just not enough information about the brain. And we're not talking about that enough. Instead, we're looking at the symptoms. We're not talking about what happened to the kid. So with him, over time, I mean, he's now starting to talk, and he's 2. He turned 2 in January. And we've just seen tremendous progress with him. And it's amazing to me. And our connection is just awesome. Like, it just is.
Yeah,
but
good.
It's not perfect. And there are still, like, things that are going on. And I'm just, like, I just almost am at a point where I don't trust the doctors anymore.
Yeah.
You know, because I've been steered wrong so many times. And I've just gotten to a point where I'm vulnerable. And I go in, like, when my son had the eczema breakout. And I just went in and I was like, I want to target the root of this. I don't want you to put a steroid cream on this because it looks bad. I want to figure out why he's having this reaction. And they were really open to that, and that was really cool. But I wish more doctors were like that. And
So that's your second child?
my middle one is who had the delays, and then my oldest with the eczema is whose doctor is pretty awesome. Yeah.
And they're with your current husband?
My oldest son is the one going through the custody stuff, and then I have 2 little ones that are with my husband.
How do they handle the custody? Do they know what's going on?
So they're 2 and 1. But I don't want to get emotional, but it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard.
No, I'm sure.
It's going to be a really tough transition. It's already hard in doing these week on, week offs. My middle son's first word, even after being speech delayed, was my oldest son's name, Jackson. They've just had an amazing bond from the day he was born. My oldest son licked him when he was born because he loved him so much. He right across the face. Gross.
Sounds like something you'd do.
Right, it is something. I used to lick Jack when he was a baby. It's the whole thing. just it was fun. I don't know. He got a kick out of it. So weird.
I love it.
But I don't know. It's going to be tough.
How's your current husband? Is he supportive of your medical cannabis use?
Our biggest issue is the cost of it. I mean,
yeah.
And there's not anything we can do. I mean, we're on food stamps. We're on Medicaid. And I have to pay these crazy prices. I can't. And so I mean, either I have to go without or we have to sacrifice. Like, it's hard.
And you go without a lot.
I go without. I mean, and it sucks. And I notice, I mean, those are the days that it's bad. And I have to take breaks from my kids because I cannot be there for them when I don't have my medication because I am so triggered by, just a smell can make me go crazy and pop off. Like, oh, and it's hard. Like, I'm in intense therapy and I'm working on being more mindful and, getting back to my truth of I'm safe and it's okay. But sometimes I just can't, and I have to go, and I have to take away from time that they need me and stuff. And so, yeah, it's tough. So my husband, he's getting more supportive, and we've really dove into, like, spirituality lately, and he's finding God for the first time in his life, which is, like, amazing. Through that, he's become more supportive. So I definitely give him props and credit, and he's trying so hard. But the financial toll between the custody case and then this is just... I really wish that they had something for people who are struggling or whatever, but
something's got to change, no doubt.
And it's like, how? Like, I just don't understand how, because it's just how the system is set up. And I mean, I see it with what I went through in custody. It's not set up to be mindful of what your experience is. It's set up to tear you apart. And I don't know. It's just. It's scary. I don't know. I feel like I err on the side of, like, nihilism a little bit in terms of being like, then what's the point? If we're set up for failure, that's my main goal as a behavior therapist is to set kids up for success. That's it. Like, I just want to see you succeed. I want to celebrate your victories. That's it. Like, I love that about life, that I get to see people do good things and succeed. I hate that our society is just set up for us to fail.
Do you have anything else you'd like to say to our listeners who are considering cannabis?
Just to do your research. I mean, it's out there. There are support groups. Like, that's what I did. I went on this Pot Mom group on Facebook, and I just found people who were doing it, right? We're waiting on this research. There's people that are in life right now that are going through it, and they talk about their experiences with it. Another thing that's been super helpful is I found a PTSD chat room. Like a 12-year-old, like, I don't know. And I get in there, and these people, you just can be vulnerable, I think, with strangers a little bit more sometimes. Just getting and talking to people. I know it's hard. It's so hard to talk to people, but it's worth it, I think, in the long run. Neuroplasticity, like, look into it.
Well, Lea, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm a true believer that stories like Lea's will break the stigma around cannabis as medicine. And I believe that the only thing that will keep people from embracing her story and the others we've heard as truth are skepticism and a jaded heart. And if that's you today, and you're still listening, thanks for considering cannabis with us today. But I'm going to ask you to do one more thing. Ask yourself, where does the skepticism come from? Where did the roots of distrust begin? Now, it's likely a trauma, perhaps even a childhood trauma. And while we may look back on that trauma and say, it wasn't that big of a deal, it was to our younger selves. Those feelings were valid then, and if we did not reconcile those emotions and hurts in a healthy way, we are still under their control. Triggers that we may not associate with those wounds will take us back to that place, and we might not even realize we're there. Now, I'm not saying that cannabis is the best way to release the damage, but it could be beneficial in therapeutic doses alongside counseling and therapy. It will be painful. You will weep, but freedom is seldom won without a struggle.
If you would like to be a guest and share how cannabis has helped your health and wellness, contact us at considercannabisnow.com. If you found anything of value in this episode, please share it with someone else. Remember to subscribe for free and get every new episode delivered right to your phone. Join us next time as we consider cannabis together.
That will get cut out.
Thank you.